So the aims of the session are we're going to share best practice at Groveland. So I'm going to go through the writing process that we have at Groveland's. I'm also going to quickly talk about Sounds Right, which I talked about at the reading session last time as well, which is our phonics program that we use at our school, which was introduced last year. I'm also going to talk about the super write and extended writing sessions that we have at Groveland's and what they are. And also talk about any writing or literacy interventions. So today's session is about talking about how to support children with writing at home, thinking about the whole school process, but also looking at it from an inclusion perspective as well. So just to introduce myself, for those of you that don't know me, I'm the assistant head at Groveland's, but my responsibility is inclusion. So that's special educational needs, English as an additional language, as well as pastoral support, which is the mental health and well-being of children. So when we're talking about writing today, those specific areas I'll touch upon as well. And like I said before, please do ask questions, please do share amazing things that you use at home as well to support your children. Some of the resources that I've put in today was actually an outcome of what was discussed at the last writing session. So I've actually added some resources that parents have shared with us. So it's really great if we can kind of support one another with that. So the first thing I want to kind of, the first kind of activity I want you to do, but it can just be in the chat, or you can say it out loud, is what you'd like to take away from today's coffee morning. Hope you've got a tea or a coffee, so that I can hopefully address that. So if you kind of want to write in the chat what you'd like to take away from this session, if you prefer to say it out loud, that's fine as well, just to, so I kind of make sure that I'm addressing everything that everyone wants to get from this session today. So I'll just give you a minute just to write.
I'm happier to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just, I mean, I've worked in education for a long time and with children for a long time, but I know that things change, and processes, approaches, that the way you do things change. So that really is what I'd like to just be updated with, the new thinking around phonics and things. I understand the value of phonics and how to put them into practice mostly, but I want to get some new ideas.
And it is, and like you said, Sue, things change over time, but also things change from school to school as well. So it is really helpful to know what the writing process looks like at Groveland. So yeah, I think that's super important. Like I said at the last reading session, even though I'm going to talk a little bit about Sounds Right today, I did talk about it in the last reading session, which is the new phonics program, but actually Mrs. Hall, the literacy leader at Groveland's, will be doing a session, a parent carer session on it. So you'll kind of be looking at the stages of the phonics program, which is starting from the initial code right till the very end of the program. So she will do an extra session on that, because that will be really helpful for you to kind of know. I'm just going to have a look at the chat. That's okay. I don't know who Galaxy A40 is, but that's absolutely fine, don't worry. Perfect. So yeah, formation of letters, spelling, absolutely. So yeah, hopefully we will touch upon all of those today. So first things first is the link between reading and writing, and please don't take anything that I say today, especially if you work within this field or you have a lot of knowledge about it, as patronizing. It's just making sure that we're kind of understanding it all together. So the link between reading and writing is obviously really important. So I've just got some quotes here. John Updike, who's an American novelist, said writing is only reading turned inside out, which I thought was a really lovely quote. And Stephen King saying, if you don't have time to read, you don't have the time or the tools to write. So kind of showing the importance of reading and how that links with writing as well. So reading provides children with an understanding of what a reader wants. So what we mean by that is, if a child is writing a newspaper report, for example, if they've never read a newspaper report before, if they've never been exposed to that before, then they're going to find it quite tricky to then write in that style. So making sure that children have a really good understanding of lots of different genres. They may tend to go towards one particular genre, whether that be fiction and adventure books or non-fiction, but try to get them to read a breadth of different books, because that will really support them when it comes to their writing, so that they know how what is the structure like in that particular text, what language does that writer use, and that is specific to that genre. Is there any punctuation, again, that is specific to that genre? And also a new thing that Ofsted introduced a few years ago as well is the presentation of our work as well. So is there certain presentational features that are specific to that genre as well? So we know with a newspaper that might be columns, and then you've got your photograph with a caption, and so kind of thinking about all those things. So without children reading those different genres, they'll find it a bit tricky. So making sure that they've got all of that understanding. A really good, kind of digressing a little bit, but a really good children's newspaper that I used with children in my last school, and it is well, it is a child's newspaper, it's called First News, and actually you can subscribe to it. So it's an e-newspaper, but you can also get a paper copy of it as well. And it's lovely because it goes through kind of news articles for that week. And it has lots of different things in it, which is super child friendly, but also shows the children the layout of a newspaper, as well as other features that you may see within a newspaper article as well. Reading, which I've just said, also helps children understand structure and plot development. It demonstrates the literary features, which we talked about as well, so language, the grammar, the punctuation that's used as well, and also a breadth of vocabulary as well that they can magpie. And last time, the reading session, we talked about children having a magpie book. So if you weren't here in the reading session, I'll talk a little bit about that. So a magpie book is a book that children create themselves, where they magpie, so borrow words from other authors or other children or other adults. And what they do is they create a book, so it can be any exercise book, that a child creates, and they on each page they've got a letter, so A all the way to Z, and again that's helping them with understanding a dictionary as well in terms of the order. And then what they do is, once they found a really good word that they like, they put it in their magpie book, and then when it comes to writing, they then take out their magpie book and they use that to help them when they're doing their writing and using adventurous words in their writing as well. And you can talk about, when they look at a word, is that word that you've chosen applicable to the genre that you're writing today? But it is a really good way of introducing children to new words, talking about new words and defining them, and also using them in the writing as well. I've just got my chat kind of flashing up, so I'm just going to check I'm not missing anything. Okay, so Sue, does that make sense about magpie, what I mean by magpie?
Yes, it does. Yes, I understand what magpies do. Thank you. Thank you, Diane.
Yes, so the first thing in our Graveland's writing process is the spark or the hook. So what we mean by that is, when we start a new genre, we want the children to be excited by that genre. So what we do is we have a range of things that we will do to get them hooked into it. So it could be a school trip. It could be that we have someone come in to do a workshop. It could be that we show children a video or audios related to that particular genre. It could be that there's a real life experience. So for example, in my old school, this was a picture of an alien landing in the field that the teachers had created. It could be that they have a role play day, artifacts, you kind of get the picture, but it's just a way of getting the children excited about their writing. So it can be anything that sparks their imagination. Once they've kind of got into the new topic, then we kind of prepare the children for the writing. So I've put an example of a success criteria that I did with my class on describing a setting. And a success criteria is basically a list of things that we're looking for in the children's writing. And this one, you know, it seems quite basic, but I've got the must and could. So must is the things that I do want to see in their writing, and could is that extra challenge. Now, not all teachers would kind of word it in this way, but they will have a success criteria for each writing genre. And what the children will do is when they're writing, they will then tick which of those elements they've included in their writing. And that's why it's really important at the very beginning, after the spark and hook, to look through exemplars of the genre that the children are writing, and then to unpick how is the genre set out, so the structure, what vocabulary has been used, so the language, what special punctuation has been used, and how are we going to present our work. And from that, looking at and analysing the genre, we then create a shared success criteria as a class. So what do we need to do to create a newspaper article? What are we going to need? And we put it under all of those four features: the structure, language, punctuation, and presentation. Okay, I'm just moving on. Sorry, there's a few more people coming in. Then what we do, the next step is rehearsal. So the speaking and listening part is so important, and we spend a long time doing this with the children. So usually our writing a particular piece will usually take between 1 to 2 weeks. And it usually is the whole 3 weeks that we do it. And the speaking and listening part of it usually would take up the first week. So you can see how important it is in the writing process. And I'm just referring to a kind of procedure that is used by someone called Pi Corbett. And he is a literacy consultant, and he created this program which was called Talk for Writing, and it emphasizes exactly that, the importance of talking to support with writing. And that's why the rehearsal is really important at the very beginning. So he has 3 stages to his program. The first one is imitation. So what is happening is the children will imitate what they have heard. So if it's a story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, they will then imitate and act out the story, and they'll do that using actions. Then the second part of that is that they change an element to the story. So it might be that they want to change the central character. So it's not Goldilocks anymore. They've changed it to another character. It might be that they want to change the setting of the story. So it's not in the woods or the house anymore. It's somewhere else. Or it might be that they want to change the ending of the story. So what you're doing is you're just changing one part of the story and easing them into the writing process, because they are already familiar with the structure, the language, the punctuation, the presentation of the story, but they're just going to change one element of it. And then the very last step is invention, which is they use the success criteria of a story to then create their own story. So thinking about the characters, thinking about the plot, and thinking about all of those things in the success criteria. So they're fully immersed now in that genre because they've imitated it, so they've copied it, they've changed one part of it, and now they're going to be writing it. So this process would take, like I said, up to 3 weeks. So it's a really long process. And we do a very similar thing at Grosvenors with the speaking and listening, and then with the writing. So what I've got here is, I'm just going to show you an example because I think it's really important to see real life examples, is an example of a story that I did with a year 4 group. So we were doing a story of Romulus and Remus, which was linked with the topic of the Romans. And the first thing that we did was we looked at the language in the story. So I gave them this word mat, and we looked at the keywords together. We talked about what those words meant. And then once we did that, we read the story. Now, what I did in this particular scenario was I had reduced the story down, because in this particular scenario, the children were acting it out. Now, we don't do this fully at Grovelands. Some of the classes, especially further down, so early years and year 1, will start to act out the story with actions, but other classes will just do the vocabulary and talk about the genre and talk about the success criteria, so structure, language, punctuation, presentation. We do find, though, by the children imitating and by the children reading out and acting, by reading out the text, they then start to remember the language, so long ago, and they also internalize the structure as well. So it helps them when they do their own text. So I had written this text, and then as a group, we acted it out together using our own actions. Then what we did was we created a story map. And I had lost my story map, so I'm just showing you an example of what that looks like. So this is from the Lighthouse Keeper's Lunch. So once they've understood the story, what they then do, and what we do as a group, is we then create a story map of what that story is. And we're just using keywords. So we draw a picture. We've obviously got arrows to show the journey of the story, and we have keywords as well. And that's really important, because that helps them understand what the structure of the story is. And again, if we're using the Pye-Corbett model, we would act that out using the story map as a guide to help us with that. Once we have done that, we then act it out. So as you can see here, the children acted it out, and just for safeguarding reasons, because it was my previous school, I've obviously put big blobs on their face, hence why you can't see them, but you hopefully get the gist of it, that they've acted it out based on those different parts of the story. And again, that is really important, because it internalizes what the story is about, and also the language and all of those things in the success criteria, which will help them when they write their own story afterwards. So we did that, and that took us a few days to all act out based on the story. While we do that, we are always thinking about the characters within that. So when we're acting it out, we're thinking about, how is the character feeling? Why is the character feeling like this? And it seems really, really obvious, but it's such an important thing to do. Now, for some children who have autism, this is something that they find very difficult to do. So using inference to describe characters' feelings, not for all children with autism, but for some, they find that quite tricky. So it's really important at this part to really think about and kind of describe together how a character's feeling and why they may be feeling this, because their interpretation may be a little bit different to what the author's intent is. So it's kind of addressing those misconceptions at the beginning. And then what I usually do is, once we've talked about how the character's thinking and feeling, what I do is give the children this piece of text, so what you can see in front of you, and then I have thought bubbles and speech bubbles coming from each of the characters, and then they will write down what the characters are thinking and what they're saying. And again, that's really important for them to understand character development within a story. Other things that we do within the school to kind of improve our speaking and listening is the first newspaper, which you can see on the right, which we talks about the children's newspaper. So talking about real life events. We also look at BBC News Round as well. That's something we do every Thursday at school. So again, talking about real life events with the children. And we also do lots of games. Now, I don't want you to look at this and think that we're just sitting and playing games at school, because we're definitely not. But these these games and activities are super important because they link in lots and lots of different areas within the curriculum. So for example, articulate is really good because it helps children use their describing skills. So teachers kind of adapt that and make their own games based on that. Like, here is a picture of something from the Romulus and Remus story. Can you now describe that to the class? So we kind of link it in with what the children are doing for that particular genre. And that could be done at home as well. So just using simple images related to the genre that the children are studying that week and asking them to use describing words to describe that. And the same with all the others, like the bananagrams and Pictionary. They're really good to help children with their speaking and their listening skills. And Countdown actually have an online program, an online game, which you can play with your children, and it has different levels that you can play with your children for the maths and the literacy side of things as well. So it's really nice to play with them. And the importance of this, like I said, the importance of the speaking and listening is it's going to really help the children with their language and understanding the author's intent when they're writing their own genres. What's really important as well, which I showed you with the Romulus and Remus word mat, is key vocabulary. So we always make sure that this is shared with the children at the beginning of the topic. So when we're unpicking the genre. And as you can see here, we make sure that our key vocabulary is visual. So not only are they hearing it in an auditory way, they also have visuals as well to help with that. So last year, when I first started at school, we purchased a program called Widget, and sometimes it's known as Communicate in Print, where you have the visuals which match with the language. I also purchased for our children who have English as an additional language, a dual translator tool, which you can see on the right there, which is in Arabic, so that they have their dual languages as well. And that also has an auditory feature where you hear the words in a different language. And for some children, we also act it out as well. So it's really multisensory, making sure that we're working towards the children's preferred learning styles. For some children, they need pre-teaching, and what I mean by that is some children find processing and retaining information quite difficult, and we identify who those children are, and the week before, so the Friday before a new week, we share the new genre with the group of children, and we go through the key vocabulary, and then this key vocabulary sheet goes home with them, so they've already got that head start for the following week. And that really helps them because they can already internalize some of that vocabulary before they start the new topic. So I want you just to have, and again, if it's easy just saying it out loud, that's fine, but I'm just going to give you a minute to kind of share on the chat what speaking and listening activities you do with your children at home. And if you don't do them at home, that's absolutely fine. Thank you for being honest if you don't. If you've got your own amazing speaking and listening activities that you do, please share them in the chat as well. So I'm just going to give you a minute just to write that in there, and then we can go through the chat. I love that idea, Emma. It's so lovely. Thank you, Tanya. That all sounds amazing. I love especially the playing manicures and pedicures. Lovely, thank you, Sue. Yeah, I think what you said there, Diane, is so important, because there's actually a new DfE document out, which is talking about the complexity of words, and how when we're talking to children that we use the correct terminology and we don't simplify it for children. Obviously we would if that child is struggling, but making sure we are using a sophisticated vocabulary with children so that they do ask, what does that mean? And for example, I used the word demanding with my child yesterday. You can infer as you will from that. And he asked what I meant. He asked what I meant by that, and we talked about that. And I have to admit, prior to that, I would simplify language, and it was actually my husband that said, don't simplify it, use a sophisticated vocabulary, and then they will ask you. And actually, it's funny because now this research has come out to say exactly the same. So I agree with you, Diane, about having those conversations, using that sophisticated vocabulary, defining that with them, acting it out, using visuals, all the things that we've just kind of talked about. But thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read, but there's so many lovely ideas there. We've got a gratitude diary, we've got kind of role play, acting things out, pretending to be different characters with different emotions, lots of imaginative games, talking about things that you find. I'm thinking of an animal a game, which is lovely. An event diary, so draw and sketching in books about people, places, food, write about how they feel. Give a choice using words and allow him time to make that choice. That's really lovely, Sue. That's okay, don't worry. I don't know who Galaxy A40 is, but please don't worry, this will be recorded so you can watch it back. So thank you so much for all of your contributions. Hopefully from the chat today you will have got a bit more inspiration for some other speaking and listening activities. And the reason I've kind of that's okay, don't worry, Vicky. The reason I've kind of emphasized the speaking and listening is because it plays such an important role at the beginning of our writing process. So you know, in our Tanya, you're here, so in our last writing session that we had in February, I think it was now, Tanya, is that one of the suggestions that Tanya had, which was a really good suggestion, and we took it on board and added it to our newsletter, was in our newsletter we clearly at that point in time had what the children had learnt that week. And in the session I was talking about how to prepare children for the genre, how to share that vocabulary with the children. And you know, Tanya, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Tanya, but Tanya like rightly said that that's amazing to do, but you know, how are we supposed to know what genre our children are learning the next week? And it would be nice to have an extra column in the newsletter to say, this is what they've learned this week, next week they're going to learn this. So based on Tanya's feedback, thank you for that, Tanya, I went back to Mr. Tuck, and since that conversation it's been added to the newsletter. So in the newsletter you now have not only what the children are learning this week, or have learnt this week, sorry, you also have the column of what they are learning. So it'd be really important to look at that so that you can talk about, and if your child needs that extra preparation, talk about the key vocabulary with the following topics, the following week's topics, and that will really help with that. So moving,
game changer. Mrs. Annings, for us,
Yeah,
actually.
thank you so much, Tanya, because it was a really important point to make, that if we're kind of talking about the importance of sharing it, you know, how do you know what the topics are? So no, it was, thank you, that's the great thing about you know, these kind of mornings, is that, you know, you're giving us that feedback to support your children, and that's exactly what we want. So no, thank you. So yeah, all of that information, thanks to Tanya, will be in the weekly newsletters. Once they have done, so we've done the spark and hook, we've looked at the text now, we've unpicked that text and looked at the structure, language, punctuation and presentation. We've acted that text out. We may have thought about the characters using speech bubbles and thought bubbles. And now we're going to do the shared writing. Now, the shared writing is probably the most important, one of the most important parts of the Groveland's writing process, because we're thinking about now the success criteria that we created at the beginning when we were unpicking the text. So we will go through that again with the children and say, okay, we are doing our story, our newspaper report, our diary entry, our non-chronological report today. Can you remind me of what the structure is like, the language, the presentation, the punctuation? And then we look at that shared success criteria again. We would have that up next to us when we're doing our writing. And then we will have our Magpie book open and look at all that key vocabulary that we have magpied from the beginning of our writing journey to now. And as you can see here on the left-hand side, this was a group that needed a little bit more support. So I took the visuals from when we acted out, and I cut and pasted them on the left-hand side. And that was there as a prompt and a guide to help them with their writing. I also, it's quite difficult to see, but underneath the picture, I also had sentence starters. And at Groveland's, we have our key questions in black, and we have our sentence starters in a blue tealy colour. And the reason that we do that is that it's that consistent model across the school. So children know that as soon as they see a sentence which is in turquoise or teal, that's their sentence starter. Now, children know that that's not prescriptive. They don't have to use that, but it's there as a guide. So they would use that sentence starter long ago, and then they would finish it off. And we did that together as a group. And that would take, the shared writing would take a day or two. And that is really important not to rush it, because that's when children are going to pick up how are you using your success criteria. And I'm repeating myself, but what is the structure, the language, the punctuation and the presentation? And as you're doing it, you go back to your success criteria and you tick off the things that you have included. The things that haven't been included, we then go back to our shared writing and say, okay, I haven't used any adjectives to describe my character. Let's now go back and start to do that. And when we edit at Groveland's, we have a purple writing pen. So you might want to do the same at home as well, that when you're writing, you're using the same format. So it's just a purple biro, but if you want to use a purple crayon or whatever, that's fine. If you don't have that colour, please don't worry. Any colour to edit is absolutely fine, but just kind of sharing what we do in case you want to do the same. And then we model on top, and that is we edit on top, and that is really important, especially in the shared writing process, because we want to show children that writing is not an exact process. And for some children, they find that really difficult. If they make a mistake in their work, they may rip their work up, they may scribble all over it because they want things to be perfect. But we make sure from the beginning of their Groveland's journey that they know that editing is a really important part of the process, and that it's only when we're publishing that we're thinking about those key presentation features and recording it in different ways. But at this point in time, you can have scribbles all over your work in purple because you're still drafting it out and editing it. So that's really important. And like I've got in the notes there, Whatever phonics sounds they've learned in that particular week, we also emphasize and use them within our writing as well. So if they're looking at the E sound that week, we'll recap that with them and then look at those E words in there, check that we've spelt them correctly. So we're always making those cross-curricular links with whatever subject it is, whether it's Romans, and with our reading as well in our phonics. And it's important to do that. Once you're confident that the children understand the process of writing, the children are then going to do their independent write, which is called a super write. And that is the culmination of 3 weeks of your spark, unpicking the text, doing your speaking and listening, and your shared write, and now we're going to do our independent write. So there's lots of nuances within that, lots of different activities within that, but the process is just exactly that. So spark and hook, reading, you've got your speaking and listening, your independent write, your shared write, sorry, and your independent write. So as you can see on the screen here, the super write can be differentiated depending on the child's confidence within that particular genre. And it's really important, I stress that, the child's confidence in that genre, because a child may be confident writing a fictional story, for example, but they may find it more difficult writing a non-chronological report. And it is us as teachers and also parents and carers to kind of pick out and determine how much support they need for each one, and not just say they're a good writer so they know how to write everything, because it might not be the case. It might be that they struggle in some areas. So we give the children a choice. So in this case here, for some children, like I said, that need that extra support, they need those visuals, they need those sentence starters, they would have this in front of them, and then they would have it on the left hand side, and they would write their story next to each picture to help them as a guide. However, there may be some children that don't need that and may just need a list of sentence starters to help them as a guide as well. So in the middle there, you can see the teal turquoise writing, and they are sentence starters, and they will be given as a list to some children who are more confident in that particular genre and would just need that. And again, we don't say to them, you have to use that. It's just a guide. It's just helping them if they need that extra support. And then what the children do is they write their own independent text based on what we did as shared writing. And it's really important that we say to them, please don't copy what we did as in our shared writing, but use that as a stimulus, use that to help you. And that kind of leads into the next thing that I'm saying, is everything that we do together over that 3-week process is going to be on our working wall. And that is really important, because it's showing the journey that we have made from the very beginning in the spark and hook right to the very end in our independent writing. So that kind of waggle means, what does a good one look like? What a good one looks like. So again, it's showing that second part of our Groven's writing process of looking at that genre that we're writing and unpicking that as well. And you can see here within the particular working wall that it's not pretty, it's not supposed to be. It's showing the process from the very beginning to the end. So again, like I said at the last writing workshop, that do that at home. If you're doing writing, if writing is something your child finds tricky, and or that genre they find tricky, is at home, have that working wall with your child as well. Put it on their cupboard, put it on the fridge, anywhere that you can, to show the same process as well. And when I was doing the writing workshop the first time round, it was the second lockdown. So it was a bit more applicable, because parents and carers were doing writing tasks at home. So we were talking about those writing, the working walls at home. It may or may not be applicable now, but it's just good for you to know that's the kind of process that we use. And then the last thing we do is the editing and the publishing. They would have edited as they went, as they have been writing, but we do then have a final session where they look again at their success criteria. They look at all the elements that they've ticked, and well done, you've got all of those in your work. And then they pick 1 or 2 elements that haven't been ticked in the success criteria, and then they start to work on that in their work. We don't do any more than 1 or 2, depending on the child and their ability, 1 or 2 things to work on, because we don't want it to be, if they've got lots of things that they haven't got in their writing, we don't want it to affect their self-esteem. Everyone has the same amount to work on for that particular genre. We also make sure, which I didn't mention, is when they do their independent write, we also remind the children of their specific writing target. So each child will have a specific writing target. And if you don't know what your child's writing target is and you do want to know, please do email your class teacher at year, or whatever your year group is, at grovelands.sch.uk, and they will be able to tell you what your targets are, and they will share them at the parents' evening as well. But it's just good for you to know what your child is working towards. We then will publish their work, and that's the part that you can really think about, that presentation part, which was introduced by Ofsted a few years back. So how are we going to present our work? How are newspapers set out? How are diaries set out? Can we do something different? So we get them to think about adding their own flair and touch to it as well, which is a greater depth objective. So when you're looking at a genre, yeah, you've ticked all the boxes off, but in order to be greater depth, what have you done? What's that extra flair you've put on top in order to get that greater depth? And it might be the way they've recorded it. It might be if they're doing a diary entry, have they done it in an interactive way where they've got little kind of envelopes they've stuck on with secret messages. And so thinking about things a bit more kind of creatively and out the box. And that will only come when the children have a really good understanding of reading and genres, which is why reading is so important. What we also do at our school is celebrate our writers, and we do that each week in our achievement assembly. So our achievement assembly is in 2 parts, actually 3 now. We've got the 3rd one that I'll tell you about, is Writer of the Week and Achievement Certificate of the Week. And Writer of the Week is exactly what it says on the tin. It is 1 child from each class who is recognised for their good writing. Now, it's really important, and we communicate this across the school, that it's not just English that we're looking at. We're looking at writing across the curriculum. And that is really important because for some of our children, there's that notion that I'm going to work on my writing target in English, but actually to understand that their writing target is throughout the curriculum. So we make sure that we're looking across the curriculum and celebrating those writers. Writing is also highly on our agenda in our school development plan. And because of that, our kind of appraisal targets are based on that. So it is a big important thing. It always is every year, but it does have a huge focus on our school development plan this year. So what we're going to do is slightly tweak the Groveland's writing process. It's still going to have those 5 key themes, but there's going to be some slight tweaks that Mrs. Hall over the course of this year will share with you. But please don't worry, the main kind of bulk of it is exactly what we've talked about today. And any changes that are made over the year, she will communicate this to you. Each class also has a specific writing target that they're working towards. So it might be accelerated learning for some children and to support groups of children that are finding writing quite difficult. And we also have continued professional development, both in sounds right and also writing as well. That Mrs. Hall has attended. And our Sounds Right programme, as I said, is our phonics programme that we introduced last year. And the last cohort of teachers are getting trained on it now. So year 6 teachers are getting trained on it now, and everyone else has been trained on it. there is going to be, like I said, an additional Sounds Right session where Mrs. Hall's going to go through the Sounds Right curriculum, what that looks like, and how you can support your child with phonics at home. I did touch on it in the reading one, but as she's doing a separate one, I don't want to kind of focus on it today. I would suggest though that you do attend it, because I know Vicky's gone now, but just the sounds that we may have been used to when we went to school is very different in the Sounds Right programme. So for example, you may have said, you may not have, but you may have pronounced the M letter as m, but actually in the Sounds Right programme it's m. And the same with the R letter. You may have pronounced the sound as R, but actually it's R. So it's things like that that may have changed since you know, we were at school. So watch this space, because she will go through the initial code with you, which is the sounds for each of the letters, which will be really important. Other things that we do, so I'm mindful of time, as you know, Tanya, I always go over, is that I'm now going to talk about the additional things that we do to support children with their writing. So what I've just talked about now is the Groveland's writing process: spark and hook, reading and unpicking the text, speaking and listening, our shared right and our independent right. But what we do for children who struggle are the following things. So the first thing is a program called Colourful Semantics, and it is actually a speaking and listening program, but we use it to support our children both with speaking and listening and also with writing. And it has different levels. So as you can see, level 1, it goes from who, what doing, who, what doing what, who, what doing what, where, and then our other level is describe. It does have additional levels to that, such as using adverbials, but these are kind of the main levels that we start with. And the reason that colourful semantics is so successful is the colourful blocks help children to form sentences, both verbally and also in written form. So if children are finding writing or constructing sentences verbally and in written form tricky, we do tend to use this. And the colours are really important, because we always use the colours as they are. So who will always be in orange. What doing will always be in yellow. And that the children get used to that format. And it's going to make a bit more sense in a second when I show you. So these are examples of the sentences using those W words. So you can see who, it's the man. What doing, he's eating. What, a sandwich. And then they're describing it. So that was level 5. Big, where, the kitchen. So if your child is finding it really difficult to construct sentences both verbally and in written form, I would really suggest using this. And when I give some extra materials after today's session, I will include the colourful semantics like this, as well as some activities which use colourful semantics. So the first thing that we would do is, in this particular activity, before we write it down as a sentence, is you will have lots of who, so a page full of orange, a page full of yellow, green, etc., etc. And then you cut them all up. And then what the children do is they create their own sentences by putting them together. So, for example, for the man eating sandwich beer kitchen, they would construct that first on the floor, on the table, wherever they are. Once they've then done that, they will say it as a sentence, thinking about your determiners as well, any extra pronouns, any extra auxiliary verbs like is, any prepositional words like in the. So kind of thinking about all those different words within the sentence. And then they will write it down. So there's lots of different levels to this. When a child has said a sentence, but they've said something incorrect, again, it's definitely not about patronizing, just kind of showing you the techniques that we use at school. We wouldn't say, no, that's not how you say it, or that's not how you write it. We would repeat it in the correct way. So, for example, if the child said, the man are eating a sandwich in the big kitchen, we would say, yes, that's right, the man is eating a sandwich in the big kitchen, and just emphasize the word that they got wrong, but not in a patronizing way, just so that they can understand the word that they got wrong. So that's really important. So again, I'll add those colourful semantics to the packs, and I'll add those extra extensions as well, whether it be adverbials or any other extensions from level 5. Did anyone want to ask any questions about the colourful semantics before we move on? Okay. So in terms of grammar and punctuation, I mean, I was kind of debating whether to put this in or not, but I thought actually it's quite good to know the different levels of grammar and punctuation that children need at each year group. Now, this is bearing in mind that that child is working at that particular year group. So if they are at year 1 and they're at the expected standard, they would know the terminology and use letter, capital letter, singular, plural, sentence, full stop, etc. When they get all the way up to year 6, they will know all of the above, plus subject, object, active, passive, synonym, antonym. And I just thought it might be a bit too much thinking about this at the moment, but I just thought it was really nice to see all the different levels that children need in terms of grammar and punctuation for their particular year group. And kind of working on those, which they will be in the classroom, but also for you to be aware of as well. If your child's in, you know, year 4, do they know that terminology? Do they know how to use it? So children that may have dyslexia, so learners with dyslexia may, and I'm going to emphasize may, because we know that dyslexia, just like autism, is on a spectrum. So children may have these features or may not if they have a diagnosis of dyslexia. And we're going to talk about screening for dyslexia in a second. So they may write slowly and with great effort. They may produce writing that is untidy or difficult to read. They may struggle to spell accurately. They may be better at talking about a subject compared to writing about it, or they may be reluctant and try to avoid writing and use distraction techniques. So it might be, I need to go to the toilet, or I need to get some water, those type of things. So again, I'm just emphasizing the may, because not all children with dyslexia, or if you do have a child with dyslexia, they may not have all of these things. Some children with dyslexia also find organisation of ideas really difficult as well. And obviously with, you know, them struggling to do some of these things, all of these things as well, it is quite draining for them. And we have to take that into account, and we do take that into account. So for example, copying from the board is a complete no-no. The amount of energy that takes a child to look up and then try and copy is too much. So for things like that, for children that have dyslexia or have some of these traits and maybe undiagnosed, we would, for example, already have the date and the learning objective printed out for them and stuck in their book so that they're ready to start their learning. And that's really important, because the learning objective for that particular lesson isn't to write the learning objective, it is to do their task. So if there's any barriers that we can reduce, we will do that for that particular child. Diane, I've just got about the younger children. What are they aiming at? Really good question, because I just got from year 1. So in terms of that, they're just mark making in general. And I will attach the new Development Matters framework. So the government have created a new EYFS framework that came out in July. And it used to be in months. So those of you in education might remember it being in months, like, you know, 16 to 24 and 30 to 50. It's now changed. So the Development Matters framework is now birth to 3 years, 3 years to 4 years, and then reception level. And within that, it will have all the different strands of the EYFS curriculum. So physical development, personal PSAD, personal social emotional development, literacy and writing, literacy and reading. So if you have a look at the literacy and writing section, it will have all the objectives, and it will be things like recognizing letters. It will be things like reception age. It will be things like writing your name. It will be labeling objects around the classroom or in your home. So they're the types of things that it will be. But if you have a look at the Development Matters framework and have a look under literacy and reading and writing, it will have all of those objectives there under those 3 age groups. I hope that's clear. I can at the end, Diane, when everyone's gone, or if people want to see as well, show you the document and go through it as well so that we can have a look. So in terms of the ways that we support children with dyslexia or show traits of this, is the first thing that we do is if a child is showing signs that they may have dyslexia, we have a screener that I purchased at the school called Lucid. Now, it's really important to note that this is just a screener, so it will only highlight if a child has a low, moderate, or a high risk of dyslexia. It does not diagnose them. And in order to get a diagnosis, this would have to be done privately outside of school by a private dyslexia company. But it does help us understand what those barriers might be and what they're having specific trouble with, whether it be auditory sequential memory, so ordering things, whether it be with phonological decoding, so what area it might be. Now, next term, so after this half term, I will be doing a next round of lucid screeners. So if you think that your child may show signs of dyslexia, and you would like them to have a screener, please do either let myself know, or you can email your class teacher or the office and I could add them to the list. What's really important to note though is that we don't do screeners for children under the age of 7. And the reason we don't do that is because the phonics programme in its complete form is done up to the age of 7. So if we do it before that, it's difficult to know whether it's because they haven't learnt certain words, digraphs or blends, or whether they do have dyslexia. So they have to be age 7 or above for that reason. That is not to say that if we think that child might have dyslexia that we don't put things in place for them. We would definitely always do that. So the first thing is a mind map. Now, in a lot of dyslexia reports and research, they talk about the importance of mind maps. That might be drawing, it might be writing things down. And I'm going to share with you a book that actually our governors, governor spoke about last time, which you might remember as well, Tanya, which kind of helps with this. So kind of concept cartoons, mind maps, really good in helping children organise their work. Because like I said, some children with dyslexia find organisation really difficult. And it might not just, you might be sitting there thinking, my child does not have dyslexia and they find organisation super difficult as well. So this might be a strategy that you want to use. Like I say all the time, strategies that we use for children with SEND or EAL or those with any pastoral needs are good for all children, not just those that have a specific diagnosis. Next to it, you will see a whiteboard and a pen. Some children retaining that information during the whole class input when the teacher is talking is really difficult. So for those children, we put a whiteboard and pen in front of them and they can either draw pictures or they can associate with the learning or write down words, keywords or key facts so that when they come to do their independent work, not just specific to writing in any task, then they can refer to that with their writing. So I would say the same with home learning as well. For example, if you're asked to watch a video or, you know, whatever the task is, have a piece of, if you've got a whiteboard and pen, brilliant, but have a piece of pen and paper in front, ask your child to write down the notes first, and then that will help them with their processing and retention. Other thing that we've got an adult talking to a child is we always recap with the child. So again, if they're finding it difficult to hold on to all the information, after the whole class teaching input, we usually then ask the adults in the classroom, either the teacher or the teaching assistants, to go over to the child to ask them to recap what they've heard. And then again, it's helping them internalize what they need to do. Another thing that we have purchased at the school is an app called Read and Write. And it is a program that helps dyslexic learners, or those that may have writing fatigue, and it supports them with the writing. And it's an interactive, you do it on the laptop, it's interactive. It doesn't highlight any words in red. And that is super, super important for dyslexic learners. We do not want to affect their self-esteem anymore by a sea of red on the screen. So it is a tool where you talk into the microphone and it writes for you. So that's the Read and Write app. We also have a sound button, which is that microphone, that green microphone you can see in the middle. And this is called a sound button, where we record. We use it in different ways. The first thing you can do is a teacher or an adult can press it and record an instruction into it. And if a child's finding it difficult, again, to retain information, then they can press the button and it repeats back what the adult has said. We also use it for children who find it difficult to hold on to their sentence. So it might be they've said it out loud, but when they get to writing it, they've completely forgotten what they were going to write. And you may see that at home as well. So again, the child uses the sound button to press into it and record their sentence. And then when it comes to writing, they will press the button and keep pressing it to help them recall the sentence. And we want to kind of wean off using the sound button over time. We obviously want to increase that those retention skills over time. We also have something called a task planner, which you can see. I will give you an actual A4 version of it so it's clear. So this again is helping with organisation. What do I need? What do I need to do? And as you can see on the right hand side, they then tick off the things that they've done. And we only do 3 things because again, we want them to have success. We want it to be achievable. And again, we've got how long for. It might be that they need a physical timer. If they need that, some children that creates anxiety. So again, it is dependent on that particular child. Right on the right hand side, we also have reading rulers. So those are pastel coloured, and each child chooses their own. Because they will see clearer with a particular colour. And we also think about how are we recording our work. If a child, especially those that fit into this criteria of writing slowly and with great effort, if they have that writing fatigue, we want to decrease that. So we think about different ways that we can record, whether it be through the Read and Write app, whether it be through recording using ICT as well. And like I said, this isn't just for children with dyslexia. You may, see that some of these strategies may work with your child. We also see a lot of letter and number reversals. I'm just going to say to you, we'll be about 10 minutes over. I understand if people need to go, but it will be 10 minutes max over. We also have a lot of letter reversals and number reversals as well, which is associated with dyslexia, but not always. And what we do is we use visuals to help the children differentiate between them. The most common ones are B and D and P and Q. And what we do is we use our thumbs, as you can see in the visual there, to help differentiate between our B and our D. And I know I'm backwards to what you are because of the camera, but yeah, B and D. We also sometimes use the bed, so you can see that underneath there, where you can see the shape of the B and the shape of the D as well. And it's just showing the children the difference between the two. And we will do that in class when they're finding it super tricky. P and Q is the same. So if I have my B and my D hand, I literally am going to flip it that way, and I've got my P and my Q. And again, it's using that visual to help children. And there's a really good book, which you can see on your screen there, which is from Lydia, and she's got a range of books that, like I said, the governor pointed out last time, which I'm going to share on here. And this is a really good one, and it's got visuals to help with letters and digit reversals. So I would highly recommend that book if that's something that your child is finding really tricky. Just going to quickly move on to EAL as well. Like I said, all of those things that all of the strategies that we talk about today support every learner. And it's not specific to EAL or dyslexic children or children with autism or ADHD. It is any, we know our children are very different, and they, like I said, they don't have to have a diagnosis in order to use any of these particular strategies. So they work for everyone. So English as an additional language, we have the English proficiency scales, and they start from A all the way to E. And what we're introducing this year is looking at these English proficiency scales for any child that has English as an additional language and highlighting against them. So if a child is new to English, we would mark them as code A, and then we would put things in to support them. So all of the strategies that I've just talked about would be really helpful. And we also have a program called Racing to English that we use in school as well, which helps them with those two areas. And research actually shows that a child who is new to English, it takes them between 5 to 7 years to become fluent. And that is really important for us to notice, both as adults, parents, carers, and also practitioners, because sometimes there is that, and I'm not going to go too much into this, but sometimes there is that worry or that concern that actually it's not EAL, it's special educational needs as well. And we do have to remember that children, like I said, to get from A to E, it will take them between 5 to 7 years. And it's really important to notice that as well. If your child is within these scales, I'm just saying that out loud to you as well, so that you don't feel that pressure that they're not, at the stage of their peers, especially if they've started further on in their education as well. And I can speak about this more in depth if that is something that you are concerned with or need a bit more information on. But this is what we are introducing this year, and we will be working towards supporting children who have EAL and special educational needs as well. But I just wanted to mention the time scale. So how do we support children with English as an additional language? In exactly the same way as we do with all the other strategies that I've just talked about. We have our dual language translator on Communicate in Print, which I showed you. But what is really important is we always encourage using their first language, children's first language, in everything. And there was a few years back that notion that if a child has English as an additional language, do not speak in your first language, always speak in English. And that is not correct. We always encourage children to speak in their first language because it will help them move through their scales in their English proficiency. So we always encourage it. We will always encourage it for their thinking, for their discussion as well. And we get them to do it, and it builds up their self-esteem within the lesson. We ask them to use it for making notes as well, and for reading and writing. And I spoke to a parent in the reading session a couple of weeks back, and she was asking the same question about, they speak Russian at home. Should she be reading Russian books or English books? And I said dual language books are amazing, just like I showed you the dual language vocabulary at the beginning of the session. So reading in your child's first language, writing in your child's first language. And what we do at school for children with EAL is they will write in their first language, and then they will translate that into English. And the reason that we do it that way is because research shows that when a child writes in their first language first, when they're doing that, they are using the success criteria that we just talked about confidently. So they are thinking about the structure, their language, the punctuation, the presentation in their first language.
When they translate that over, it is then easier for them to translate it into English. Because if they were to write it in English first, they've got so much to contend with that it becomes too overwhelming and consuming, because they have to think about the grammar as well as all of the other features that we just talked about. So that's why we do it in the way that we do, because we're following that research, and it is much more easier for the child to translate once they've written in their own language, using their own grammar from their first language as well. Writing fatigue. So children, your child may have writing fatigue as they get through the school, and you know, the amount of writing increases. This will obviously become more apparent, but we do have writing fatigue all the way into nursery and reception as well. So it's very dependent on the child. So we are very good at Groveland's at making sure that we accommodate for this in lots of different ways, but particularly the children will have sensory breaks and sensory circuits. So during the day, if we know that a child needs a break, not necessarily just in writing, but they need a break from their learning to help with refocusing, is we will put in sensory circuit time. Now, what I mean by sensory circuit is, if you look at the right hand side, the picture that I've got there, it is basically a circuit of activities, physical activities, which support with their gross motor, but then in turn will help with refocusing as well. Within the classroom, I also have created some sensory snacks, which you can see in the middle there, and the children can do them at any time. So it's really lovely to see children, when they're doing their super right, to in the middle of it put their pen down and start doing some of their sensory snacks to just help with the refocusing. And it is, those of you who are in education, were in education, it's the new brain gym that we kind of, the sensory snacks kind of feeds off the new brain, is the new brain gym. So we're using lots of activities to help with refocusing. And again, I have sent these sensory snacks to parents, carers in the past, but I will reattach them to today's notes as well. So again, you can do that at home, not just for writing, just any task that is too overwhelming. They need a break, they need a movement break, they need to stop, and then choose 2 or 3 of them, and then they go back to what they were doing. And what we do in the classroom is we blow them up onto A3, laminate them, and we stick them around the board in the classroom so that the children can independently do it. And obviously there's other things that we use as well. We use Headspace, which I haven't put on here, but Headspace, which is a mindfulness app, which is really, really great. I use it not only at school, but also with my own children. They've just introduced a new feature on the Headspace, which is about sleep. So there's like lots of mindfulness activities on sleep, and it ranges from 1 to 5 minutes. So you can differentiate it for your particular child. We also do things like Go Noodle, Wake Up, Shake Up. So any of those things that will support your child. And you know your child, you know what works for them, whether it is going outside and bouncing on a trampoline, skipping, running. Some of our parents have said that they've bought their children punch bags, and they do that in the garage. Whatever works for your child. And in the pastoral training, parent carer training at the end of time, I think it's the 25th of November, we're going to talk more about mental health and well-being, and more about sensory breaks and sensory circuits within that session. So we've talked a little bit about communicate in print. So like I said here, having a multi-sensory environment is super important. We have to make sure that we are teaching to every single style within the classroom, whether that's auditory, visual, or kinesthetic, and moving around. And we make sure that our lessons incorporate all of those. And Widget is great because it's got the visuals, but it also has the auditory as well. And as you can see here, this is based on the Julia Donaldson book of Superworm. So all I did was copied and pasted the part of the story into Widget. And then as you can see, all the visuals then come up. You can get a parent account. I can't remember how much it is, but you can get a parent account if you think this is something that would be really beneficial for you to use. I did also, I haven't put it on the slides, did also in the second lockdown and also before that, send every parent carer, and if you're new to the school, I will resend it, a visual timetable for home. And that is really, really important for some children because they like those rules, they like those routines, and having a visual timetable really helps them. So if you want to use that in your own setting, then please do. We talked about in the reading session about putting reading in through the day, showing the children in their visual timetable when they're going to read, whether that be before bed or after dinner or before dinner, because some children find it difficult to read just before bedtime. So using the visual timetable within the setting as well. And just to finish off, I've just put some additional support and resources that we use at the school that you may want to use as well, some of which you've already mentioned. So at school, some children have a Dyslexia account, which is to help them with their phonics and their reading and ultimately their writing. If they do have that, you will be aware of it, and the username and password will be on the inside cover of their reading record. And this starts at year 2, so it's year 2 upwards. We also have handwriting interventions using lots of different programs like Write from the Start. We have handwriting resources where we have ergonomic pens, or we have pencil grips to support children. We also have, which I haven't put in here, if a child is finding it quite difficult to sit on their chair, and especially if they're doing a long extended piece of writing, we have wobble cushions. We also have sensory things like a TheraBand on their chair for those people that need that sensory input. We have task planners for organisation, which I talked about earlier. Sound buttons, some of them I'm just going to rush through because we talked about them. Sound buttons, dictaphones working in the same way as recording what we want to say. We really encourage different ways to record, so we're not just writing all the time, especially if a child has got writing fatigue or a diagnosis where they do need to write in different ways. We have the read and write program, which has the dictaphone tool where you speak into it, and we also have sounds right interventions. As well as that, we obviously have focus support in lessons. If a child has got dyslexia, they have their reading ruler, but we also match that with a pastel coloured book. So it's really important. I know I touched upon this in the reading session, but children who have dyslexia find it really difficult to read black print on white paper. And that's why the reading ruler really helps that, because they can focus on that particular text. And as you can see on that reading ruler there, I apologise for those of you who know about this or in this last session, you just bring it down line by line so it's not overwhelming for the child and they're just focusing on that colour. Whatever colour they have for the reading ruler, we then replicate that in their pastel coloured books. We make sure that the front is the same as their peers, so that they don't look or are made to feel different. The following resources, but actually the resources that I've said a couple of times now, were recommended by our school governor, and there's lovely visuals in these. So tricky spellings in cartoons, building blocks of grammar done in a visual way, tricky punctuation in cartoons, the Rehearsal book that I showed you as well. So all of them are really, really visual. I've got something that's come up. We're nearly there. I think we are there actually. Absolutely, Diane. I think we can definitely in the session, in the pack of materials that I'm going to give you, I'm going to give some suggested activities, and it's a shame that we couldn't do the practical workshop, because within that we would have talked about all the different activities that you can do, some of which I can talk about now. So things in terms of mark making, sorry, if you haven't seen that, Diane's just put, you know, are there more specific kind of reception activities? So in terms of mark making, it's writing with anything. So big markers, chalk. A really lovely activity is, and I talked about this at the last session, is having a blackboard and then writing on the blackboard in chalk with the keywords that they've looked at. So if the phonics sound that week was E, which I've said before, you would write the words that have that sound in it in chalk. What the child then does is they dip their paintbrush in water and they make the writing disappear. So they go over the word and then the writing disappears, but they're focusing on those key phonics. Also things like sand trays, so having sand trays in there and using their finger to do particular sounds or particular handwriting. We also have easels as well outside where the children will use paintbrushes to mark make. We have water trays to do that. We have like shaving foam where the children will do that. So any big activities, but using lots of different utensils as well, using lentils, using pasta to make words. But I will put that, Diane, all in the resources. I will put lots of different activities to support with early years, as well as Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. And I can only apologise that we weren't able to do that because we would have been able to have a go at some of those activities. But hope that's a starting point, and like I said, I will kind of add those on to the materials at the end. Okay, so we are at the end of the session now. Like I just said to Diane, it would have just been really nice, like with the reading, to actually then go away with your children and have a go at lots of different writing activities. But I will put them together in a pack of lots of different ones that you can try out at home. I would say make it fun, make it practical. Think about what works for your child. Are they a visual learner? Are they auditory? Are they more kinesthetic and like to do things? And go from there, and also go from what they like as well. And that's really important, that when we support children who are reluctant in writing, we often start talking to them about what they like. And then that's a starting point to support us with them writing. So for example, I had a reluctant year 6 writer who was a boy, and he was talking to me about superheroes. And then we started, I know it sounds massively cliche, but sometimes we kind of miss this, started writing comics about superheroes. And that was the hook into writing and having that passion back again. So just having those conversations with your children about how do they learn best and what are their interests will really help with that if your child is reluctant to write. Before we go, I just want you to either put in the chat or say out loud, because it is towards the end, is first of all, what strategies do you use at home to support your child with writing? What has been the impact of this? And also, have you got any questions? And also, is there anything that you're going to take away from today's coffee morning? Not necessarily from me, could be from something from the chat. And is there any further support that you would like in terms of writing with SEND, EAL, pastoral needs, or just writing in general? So that was a lot to take in, I apologise. But anything in the chat, or you can say it out loud if you want.
Can I ask? I'd like to ask a question, really, actually. I mean, I found it very helpful today in lots of ways. But a couple of things that occurred to me, the exercise book you mentioned, where you put the A to Z, would you put capitals and lowercase in that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Sue, I didn't mention it. Yeah, I would definitely do the capital and the lowercase. And
because
what I said, what I said in the reading one that I didn't mention here is that in the Sounds Right, we don't talk about letter names or names of letters till the very end of the phonics program. We talk about the sounds of letters first, and we really emphasize that. And we kind of use and I apologize because I know that you're gonna those of you who are attending the Sounds Right will hear it then, but we say the letter name is M, the sound is and that's the kind of that's the script that we would use. But yeah, absolutely, capital and lowercase. Yeah.
Okay, and following on from that, would you suggest that an exercise book that you do that with should be pastel coloured, full stop? Or
Yeah, I think if you can, that would be amazing. I mean, in terms of at school, all of our backgrounds of our whiteboard screens are always pastel coloured, and that's our school strategy. We don't have anything on white because we want to make sure that we're obviously supporting our dyslexic children, and also is good for lots of like ASD children as well. They prefer blue and purple mainly, research shows. So I would say absolutely that would be amazing if any pastel coloured. And Amazon has got lots. The dyslexia, if your child does have dyslexia, the dyslexia shop, it's actually called the Dyslexia shop, has got lots of different pastel coloured resources as well.
Okay, lovely. And my final question, sorry to take everybody's time.
Okay.
When you do write letters with them, or you're working with them, do you write in the cursive style?
Yes. So we start right from the very, that's a really good question. So we write cursive from the very, very beginning. So reception at this moment in time are starting to write, and absolutely they're using the cursive style.
Okay, lovely. Lovely, thank you. I think that's all. Thank you.
I will, based on what you said, Sue. Oh, sorry. Based on what you said, Sue, I will also add the cursive script into the pack as well, so you know what cursive script we use. So thank you for thank you for the questions, and thank you for saying that. It's really important. Sorry.
So I was just kind of about the cursive script. I watch my daughter try and write words, and I watch her stop halfway through a word as she's kind of trying to do the joined up and the letter formation, and then think about the spelling. And I often want to say to her, look, just try and write it without worrying about joining it together. She kind of seems like she doesn't feel like she can do that because I'm not the teacher and I can't tell her to do that.
I think you're right, James. I think that that's what we teach, that's what we want them to do. But we do have children in this school where it is too much. Like you said, it's too overwhelming. There's too many things going on at the same time. And then we're seeing that is then leading to them to just not want to write, and then find strategies to get out of writing. So we would say to them, just write in kind of print form, and that's absolutely fine. And we can work towards the cursive. But I would definitely not, and it sounds like you're not anyway, but I would definitely not kind of push with the cursive, because if it's just too much, we can just start with the print and work up towards that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still working up towards cursive at the age of 40, so. But I am dyslexic, so maybe that's to do with it. So.
Yeah, and it does, like, research also shows that the cursive, the rhythm of the cursive kind of pattern that you're doing, as it were, supports dyslexic learners because of the shape of the words as they're doing the cursive. But saying that, I have spoken to people with dyslexia who say the absolute opposite and say, actually, it confuses me more and it's too much. So I would say whatever is comfortable for the child, we would always make sure that we're accommodating for them.
My personal experiences with the cursive is that it's very easy to go from a nicely formed sentence and you start writing faster and you're basically just scribbling words, and you know what you're writing in your head, but nobody else can read it and you can't read it yourself later. And that, especially when you don't want to write, is what happens. I find.
I mean, that's what, and I think children are the same, and we tend to have sometimes the children are writing from the margin and then it kind of goes into a kind of diamond as well. So kind of, I think whatever works for your children, we have, as long as they're passionate about writing and they want to write, that's the first thing for us. and writing lots of different things as well. But yeah, I would definitely say stick with print for now, and hopefully we can work towards that. But if we don't, we don't.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Mr. Tuck might disagree with that.
Yeah, I can have this conversation with multiple
from a
people.
send perspective, if it's not, we're never going to force anything, and if they're more comfortable doing it in print, then yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Was there anything else? I just wanted to just check I haven't missed anything. Yeah, absolutely, Tanya. I think, yeah, just write whatever you want. I think that's really good, and knowing your son, I think that is a really good strategy for him to have that power of writing. And we have things like when we've had authors come in and poets, and they do things called lightning writes with the children, which is just write about anything. And you see the look of fear on the children's face, because it's like, what do we write? But actually, the more you do it with the children, the more, they get used to it. And so, yeah, just do whatever works for you. Sorry, I've got building work going on, hence the... Is there anything else that anyone wanted to ask or share? Because I think that's what's really nice about sharing lots of different things. I've got Emma writing that she writes comic strips, invent Pokemon. I love that. Label different powers. That's amazing. Make a scrapbook. All of these ideas are so good. Picture me. Amazing. Okay, well, hopefully, if it wasn't necessarily from me or Groveland's, hopefully you got something out of today, whether it be from someone else, the chat. But like I said, I will put a pack of activities together, and it will have all of that. The cursive script will be in that. I will also add a feelings chart as well, because that will really help when talking about characters' feelings and emotions, and the visual timetable as well within that. Is there anything else that anyone thinks they would find helpful in the pack of resources that we haven't talked about today?
Well, I know you've recorded this, but if you had any notes to kind of read back across what you've just talked about today, that would be really useful.
Absolutely. Because... yeah, definitely. I'll send I'll either send this PowerPoint or the kind of key messages. Absolutely. Yeah
that'd be brilliant. Don't like spend a whole bunch of time making it all pretty. Just note form is useful for triggering memories, right?
Okay, I love how you know me so well already, James, and we've only just I will also send you the Groveland's writing process. So that's already in a document which has got the flow chart of the 5 kind of main areas, starting from the spark all the way to the independent write. So I will send you that so that you've got that to hand. Perfect. Yes. Yeah, Emma, that's, yeah, absolutely. So Emma said about terminology as well, which, yeah, perfect. Okay, great. And Diane, I will add some activities. So starting to write is literally at the very beginning, things like a circle or a line or a straight line or a diagonal line. So you kind of work on shapes to begin with when you're mark making. But again, I will put that all in the pack, so you kind of I can show the progression from the shapes at the beginning to actually then forming letters. So I'll make that clear in the pack. Is there anything else before we go today? Perfect, thank you. Thank you so much for your contributions, your comments, and your questions as well. And Maggie, I will be sending it all over, all the information that we talked about today. It will be sent over via email, so you will get it from info at Groveland. Sometimes it does go into junk, so I would say check your spam, because sometimes
okay, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
carers. Yeah, so it will be there. If I do miss anything, please just ping an email, either to me if you've got my email address, or to info, and I'll send it to you. And if you've got any specific questions for your child that you didn't want to talk about today, or that you remember after today's session, please contact me and we can talk about it together for your particular child and how to support them as well. Perfect. Thank you so much, and sorry for going over. Those that know me know I always seem to go over, but yeah, thank you so much, and hope you have a great day.